Evening, Rush Nation. Welcome to the 5 Yard IDP pod with me, Nath Davis. Today we'll be reviewing Week 16 and getting you ready for Week 17. This will be a final pod of the season, apart from a show we'll probably put together around the Super Bowl. And it's finals week. Mad. Absolutely crazy. Right,
Well,
Bren.
it is for some people.
How did you get on?
I had a lovely Christmas weekend, albeit rather subdued, as I think it was for most of you guys out there. Fantasy-wise, bit of poo actually. My team was decimated going into our matchup in Ray Lewis, wasn't it? So
Yeah.
I think I had one player on my bench who happened to be Alan Lazard, who actually scored quite well, so I should have moved him. And the rest of them were COVID, IR, out, doubtful, dead. It was absolutely, it was a massacre. I couldn't waver anyone in, and so you won that sort of fair and square, to be honest, because we're all in the same boat. But my bench was a little bit ridiculous this weekend. So
yeah, I mean, I differ to you because I'm in so many other leagues as well. So I mean, I'd be disappointed if I wasn't in at least a couple of them. But
so
I've got
you and Tommy in the final, isn't it?
it is, yeah, in ours. So I'm in the final of the EFFC, which is the European one, which is a big one for us. If I can hopefully do all right this week, I'm going crazy on waivers at the moment, so we'll see. Fantasy and frames, the Four Eyes competition. I'm in the final of that, and I'm in 3 other Dynasty League finals as well. Missed out just on the defensive invitational. I lost to my man Joey the Tooth last week, and I was absolutely robbed in our home league. So I don't know what the hell happened in that. It's just unbelievable watching that. The Browns. Well, I've got a problem now. I really hate the Ravens secondary. I just hate them. Can't stand them. Whatever they do in the future, I will always remember the day they just gave up. And
well, to be honest, anyone out there that can name the Ravens secondary at the moment,
well, exactly.
Good luck to them. That includes front office in Baltimore.
It was just hideous how many the garbage time points were just hideous towards the end of it anyway. Yeah. But just touching on the 2 IDP leagues which we run, I'm happy to say the finals, they're all set for this week, and we have Dan Hughes, Dan H99, our very own Dan. He is against Phil Savory 23 in the final of the Lawrence Taylor League. And myself, I'm in the final of the Ray Lewis League against Tom Chick, of all people.
Yeah,
Chico's legs.
I'll be sitting at the 3rd place playoff in that one. So finished 6th, I think, overall in Lawrence Taylor.
Bad,
but yeah, I'll take 3rd place in Ray Lewis. But hey, it is what it is.
Both of those leagues, they've been great they've been tight throughout. Actually, if you look at the games, pretty much everybody has had a couple of good weeks, and that's quite nice to have. It keeps everybody interested. I hope to get some Google feedback forms out as well to all the guys that were in the leagues, just to grab some feedback on the leagues, the format, and the scoring. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everybody who's got involved with the IDP leagues. We know that the IDP community is still a very small community in the UK, but it's growing, and we want to be ahead of the curve. But like everything starting off, we need the support and we need contributions from you guys. And for that, we are so grateful. There are some talks and ideas going on in the background with regards to the plan for next year. And they're exciting. There's some exciting things potentially on the horizon for us. Maybe some collaboration, maybe some tournament news. We'll wait and see. But we hope to let you know more in February. But it's exciting stuff. Before we go into the actual stuff, the week 16 reviews and the 17 matchups, we've got to go through the usual. So let me just put on that. And then, as you know, this pod and others we do are supported by Manscaped. Manscaped are our sponsors, and they are the market leader in men's below the waist grooming. They have just released the Lawnmower 4.0, which is a fantastic bit of kit. One of the best things about it is the skin safe technology, so you get no nicks on your bits, and you can receive 20% off with the code 5yard at manscape.com. It really is a game changer in that area, and you're missing out if you don't have one. And as I said, you can get 20% off with the code 5yard at manscape.com. There's also free worldwide shipping, so sort yourself out and get involved. So Brendan, you're up with the first one on the reviews, and it's the Panthers at the Saints. All Sunday games. Big slate Sunday, big slate.
Yeah, not going to be doing much Sunday evening. Panthers at the Saints. So Panthers coming in off the back of that 32-6, battering by the Bucks, really leaving 5-10, bottom of the division. Top week 16 IDP performances make for slim pickings, as probably isn't a surprise. So only a couple of players to really highlight, and no one really going to be looking at. Certainly not top scorer sort of at DL. We got Sieta Gross Matus, who we've mentioned maybe once or twice in passing. Top scored with all of 15. Top tackling linebacker for the Panthers, Shaq Thompson, picked up 13.5 points. And to be honest, in the secondary, Miles Hartsfield is the only player to break double figures, and that was only just with 10. So pretty indicative of the Panthers at the moment. The Saints come into the game off the back of that 20-3 defeat to the Dolphins at home in that crunch game Monday night. More about that in a little while. But it does leave them 7-8, but still in the hunt. Top IDP performances came from Cam Jordan. Had a good day at DL, 24 points, including a couple of sacks, which I wasn't too happy about. Also at DL, Marcus Davenport picked up 16 points and another sack. And elsewhere, someone I'll come to again in a little while, Pete Werner at lineback, safety, Gardner Johnson, both had decent games as well. I did say last week, Marshawn Lattimore, had a funny feeling. Lattimore at corner, who I thought might be a bit of a pain in the ass for Tua. He did pick him off and scored okay in fantasy. But to be fair, the interception was an awful throw from Tua. It was right down his throat. I don't know what he was looking at when he had Waddle wide open in the middle. So anyway, the matchup, the Panthers are a mess at the moment. I mean, this Burt and Ernie QB rotation that seems to be going on is just
it's a nightmare.
It ain't working. I've got a sneaky suspicion, and I've heard this on a lot of other pods, that I wouldn't be at all surprised if Sam Darnold starts for the last two games. They've got to have maybe a last look at him before they pull the trigger, I guess. Defensively, to add to their problems, looks like Shaq Thompson, Brian Burns are going to be out this weekend. So Taysom Hill will be back under center for the Saints this weekend. And given the mess the Panthers offense is in, I expect the Carolina defense to see quite a few snaps this weekend. So Hassan Reddick, he's the Panthers sack leader. You can start him at DL. He's a fairly safe bet. Jeremy Chin is top tackler at the moment, 103 on the season. And an outside pickup with Shaq out. If you're looking at linebacker, then Jermaine Carter goes into the game as the Panthers' top tackling linebacker. So again, not too much to get excited about on the Panthers as per the last few weeks. Saints, on the other hand, I felt sorry for the defense. I did get up and watch the game in the wee small hours Tuesday morning. They played well despite injuries, Demario Davis being out. But fourth string QB, I mean, you just couldn't keep the defense off the field. No. So, they can only do so much. They got good pressure on Tua, as the sacks indicate. They forced a fumble as well. There was a pick, albeit a poor throw from Tua, but that was indicative of, or representative rather, of some of the pressure that front line were getting on Miami. I expect a similar game plan, to be honest, against a rather confused sort of Panthers offense. DL Cam Jordan is a must start for me. Game off the back of big scores in not just last week, but the week before as well. At linebacker, there's still no confirmation, unless you know something to the contrary regarding Demario Davis. COVID situation, it still seems to be, he's not listed as having any sort of projected figures on sleeper, so read into that one. So if he's cleared, then you'll play him. He's the Saints' top tackler. If he's out, I know a lot of people are big on Zach Bourne. He's on a lot of rosters, which surprises me. I don't really rate him. I don't. His figures, if you go back over the weeks, are not great. If you look at his stats, then nothing too excitable. But if Davis is out, I would look at Pete Werner. He had a good game Monday night. And he'd be my choice. There's a lot of people who are quite keen on him. His tackle numbers are double Bourne's, despite playing 2 games less this season. So again, he'd be the obvious one to step in. A DB this week for the Saints, given the uncertainty regarding who starts at QB for the Panthers, I'd play safe and just look at the safeties as you would most weeks. Marcus Williams, Malcolm Jenkins, very similar stats, decent tackle numbers, as I've said in previous weeks. Williams seems to be the more readily available on waivers, but there isn't a huge amount to pick between them. Summing the game up, Saints win. Defense still looks solid on Monday night, as I've said, despite the injuries. And with Taysom back, the offense is going to be better. And they're still in the hunt. It's a must-win game for them. And the Panthers are just bad, basically, at the moment. So
yeah, I'm with you. Exactly the same on there. It's definitely Saints for me. And the mention of Cam Jordan, I think that's a real interesting one. I think going into the finals, it's tough looking at some of the DLs that I'll touch on a few of them. One of them being somebody like TJ Watt at this moment in time, where everyone's got this conundrum of whether the Steelers seem to be playing him. Therefore, I should start him, but he's not. Well, I'll talk about that in a bit. It's crazy from my mind. I don't understand what they're doing, but there we go. So yeah, Saints for me, and there's definitely a couple of pickups from the Saints side. Panthers wise, nothing really that jumps out at me. In that one, I don't think there'll be many people starting many Panthers players, especially with Shaq being out. Yeah. So there we go. Falcons at Bills for me. Let's start with the Falcons. Week 16 was a decent win as predicted by the Falcons, and they got the job done. Really, that was really what they had to do: get out there and get it done, and they did it. Foysaid Alukan is having himself an absolute monster season. He sits 4th overall on IDP Plus. That is overall. He sits number 4. 270 points on the season he's got. In week 16, he scored 31 points. It was made up of 14 tackles, tackle for a loss, and an interception. It makes him a top IDP prospect for next season. It'd be really interesting to see where people are going to start putting him going into it. His partner in crime, fellow linebacker Deion Jones, he scored 17 points, 10 tackles. And the Falcons, they remain one of the top teams when targeting linebackers. They're one of these teams where teams predict they like to. They're a safe bet to run on, and over the middle, it means big work for the middle linebackers, and they are just a safe bet in that area to pick either of those two up. Like many weeks this season, though, there's no need to really mention any other players on the Falcons D. Looking through it, I can't predict them to be relevant, and especially this week against the Bills, it's going to be tough sledding for them. And yeah, so over to the Bills. Last week they had a great win against the Pats. And Micah Hyde, he had himself an absolute day, which is one thing we didn't really predict too much. But Micah Hyde, it catapults him up to 11th place DB overall on the season, which is quite decent for Micah Hyde. It was quite a day for the other star DB, Jordan Poyer. Micah was definitely the main man. He got 2 huge interceptions, which really helped take the game away from the Pats. Apart from Micah Hyde's 25.50 points, the only man to mention is probably DL Ed Oliver. He scored himself 16.50 points in the week. He's had quite a steady old season as a whole. Looking at this one, the actual matchup itself, to me, there's not a lot of difference to go for. I would still stick with the Bill. I would stick with the Bills DBs in this one. I'd look at if you can. Obviously, you're not going to be able to pick these guys up, but you got to be starting Poyer and Mika Hyde. Apart from that, though, there's not a massive call for anywhere to really look at. Obviously, you're gonna go for the linebackers, but I don't think they're going to score that highly against a team that the Bills won't run the ball too much. But I've got the Bills to win the game, and I don't see it being close. I fancy the Bills DBs to score big along with their offense. But yeah, all Bills for me. What do you reckon, Bram?
Yeah, same here, mate. I think the Bills, that was a crucial win because of the run-in the Bills have got.
Yeah.
Falcons and then the Jets. They're two must-win and will win games, basically.
The only interesting thing might be if they do get in front, whether they do start resting some of those players in the fantasy side of things, especially next.
Yeah.
Well, we might be all right this week. With this extra game this season, might be okay. But yeah, last season there was definitely a lot of resting going on of some of those top players, which
it's an interesting point,
fantasy.
actually. Yeah, because the extra gamers will play into the hands of anyone sort of going into a crucial game this week, like you say, because this week there are still teams they're still trying to wrap up titles. They're still, they've got an eye on the number one seed, home field advantage, etc., etc. So yeah, unlike other seasons where you're going, well, yeah, they should win it on paper, but they're clean and clear. Yeah. Makes a big difference this season. But yeah, Bills all day long for me. Okay, so I'm moving over to what I think could be the game of the weekend. Should be the most entertaining game of the weekend.
Mad shootout. Is that what you're predicting?
Well, I'll get onto that in a minute. Everyone's hoping for, isn't it? That's what I base my analysis on. Anyway.
Yeah.
So obviously Chiefs at Bengals. As I say, potentially the game of the weekend. Chiefs look like they're firing again at the right time of the season. 36-10 win on Sunday over let's face it, a poor Steelers team. But to be fair, they had to do it with a few key players out. But as a reflection on that, the top IDP performers week 16, not too much to really review because they were just in charge of the game, really. So we got corner Javarius Ward picked up 17.5 points, including a pick. Other corner, L'Jarius Sneed, 15 points, and not much else. Frank Clark played all right, went for double figures, had a sack, but that was kind of it, really, in a game that the Chiefs' offense just dominated. The Bengals, well, forget me highlighting Joe Burrow last week for being the most picked and sacked QB in the league. Didn't seem to bother him on Sunday as he ripped him up for 525 yards, albeit a very banged up Ravens secondary, as we've already mentioned, and probably will do again. And yeah, 41-21 puts them 9-6, top of the AFC North. Top IDP scorers for him at the weekend: Trey Hendrickson, 19 points, picked up his 14th sack of the season for good measure. DB Von Bell, 18 points, first pick of the season, which is a little bit surprising. But Mike Hilton, 16.5, and Chidobe Awuzie went for double figures. The matchup, I think, as Nath's already touched on, it's probably only a matter of time before this game descends into a bit of an air show for Mahomes and Burrow. And that's certainly what we want to see. So the DBs have got to be looked at. Now, for the Bengals, that means Von Bell and Jesse Bates at safety. However, crucial playoff weekend. I'm not sure I'd gamble on any of the Bengals corners. For me, they're just not consistent enough, so I'd be sticking with the safeties in that secondary. At linebacker, Logan Wilson's almost certainly out again this week. He's down as doubtful at the moment. He ain't going to play, I don't think. So someone we've mentioned before, Jermaine Pratt, would be a great pickup. But because of Wilson's recent injury and the fact that a lot of people have talked about Pratt, he's been playing well, I suspect a lot of people have already jumped on that bandwagon. But if Wilson's out and you've got Pratt, then he's a solid play for this weekend. At DL, despite everything, you've still got, just like me saying it could be an air show. You've still got to include sack leader Trey Hendrickson. He's averaging pretty much one a game this season, so you'd be hard pushed to leave him out. There will be a certain element of running the ball, maybe, but I think we're hoping it turns into a bit of a shootout. Chiefs again at DB, that's going to be a factor given the opposition. So L'Jarius Sneed at corner, and the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, who looks like he should be fit for Sunday. They're going to be the main threats to Joe Burrow in the secondary. Linebacker Nick Bolton, Chiefs top tackler by a fair distance, is due back this weekend. Finally, DL, you've got sack leader Chris Jones. But if you are short of DL this weekend, I'd look at the guy just behind him in the stats, Frank Clark. As good as Burrow was on Sunday, he is still the most sacked QB in the league. Yeah. So there's always that potential there. As fun as the game should be, you've still got to go with the stats sometimes and look at how some of these QBs, and more importantly, the guys in front of them have been performing. Summary, I'm going to go Chiefs. I like the Bengals. I tipped them last week. I think they're still a lot of fun to watch. But the Chiefs are just hitting form again. Kelsey's back. As I say, Bengals were great fun on offense, but they're not going up against some banged up D like they were last weekend. No. So I think the Chiefs are just getting into their stride for the postseason now.
Yeah, I agree. I've got Chiefs, and I don't think it will go to plan for Burrow. I think that was like I said earlier. I mean, we know I banged up the Ravens. It was a bit tongue in cheek, really, about how bad their D is. And he completely took advantage of those injuries more than anything. But he, like you said, they just won't have it this week. The Chiefs get fired up, and their DBs, they'll be all over the place. Honey Badger back, he'll be barking out orders, and they'll be flying all over the place, which might upset them, the Bengals. And I just expect it, they will. I just don't think they'll be able to cope with the Chiefs' defense mainly. So I've got next for me is the Jags at the Pats. Now, this is one that I've sort of like semi-skipped. We've got 3 each that we've got to skip. But this one is a semi-skip. Forgot to talk about the Pats, but I don't really want to talk about Jags. So I will start. So I wouldn't start any of the Jags players on the IDP front in this one. If you had to go linebacker, that's the only area that I would potentially consider, but you've got to have a look who's on the COVID list, as I'm pretty sure Damien Wilson has just landed on it. But really, Jags wise, they're done, aren't they? So for me, the Pats, let's go to them. The Pats, it was a quiet week IDP wise in their defeat to the Bills, and only the DBs, Miles Bryant and the excellent Kyle Duggar, are really ones to mention. Linebacker Carl Van Noy scored okay. Obviously, if you're playing him in a DL spot. This week, I would go Duggar and Van Noy. They're players to pick. Not sure on the status of Bentley and Judon. Maybe John Bentley's probably not in the mix anyway for a final. But Judon would be if he was fit in this game. It's just whether he is or not. So he's one to keep an eye on. If not, Carl Van Noy is worth a shot in this kind of matchup. Pats win it for me against an absolute poor Jags team who've just all given up, really. I mean, James Robinson's out as well now, so they are completely done for me. And that is where some the Pats could really take advantage of it. What do you reckon on that? Have you got obviously got the Pats winning, surely?
Yeah.
As you're a big supporter.
Well, huge, yeah. Have been for years, but they're still. I mean, what impressed me last weekend was how the Bills' sort of offensive game sort of neutralised a defense that we've been so big on for the last probably couple of months. I mean, Judon didn't really get a look in, but they're still a good defense. Jags, rudderless at the moment, so just waiting for a holiday. Pats win.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed. Just going back to that game, I was impressed by the Bills that they Josh Allen like he does. He just hit his targets, and I mean, that was where for me the game was kind of lost because Mac Jones didn't quite. A couple of those interceptions were at big points of the game. Just when the Pats were trying to get their foot back in the door, really, and it just didn't pay. And every time it did it, it was just the Bills went and made them pay again. So yeah, Pats win for me. Where are you? You're Dolphins at Titans, Bren.
Going to Tennessee. Yeah, so
Tough one.
Start it is, yeah, but potentially a good game. Let's start with the Titans. So they go into this off the back of what was a really important win for them, 2017 over the Niners last Thursday. I think I've completely lost track.
Yeah.
But they're doing it with a Colts team right behind them. They just will not go away, this Indianapolis side. So the Titans are going to be conscious of that. This AFC title hunt is going to go down to the wire. Top IDP Titans players against the Niners. Linebacker Bud Dupree, top scored with 15.5 points, including a sack, but he's ruled out with COVID this week. And frankly, given his stats over the 9 games he's played this season, you wouldn't be starting him anyway. Elsewhere, nothing major. The DB Amani Hooker, 15 points, including his first pick of the season. At DL, Danico Autry, 14 points, 8th sack of the season. But he's on the COVID list as well, according to the news at the moment. So moving over to the Dolphins. Well, the defense had a field day, let's be honest, against Puri and Book. As I said, I got up, set the alarm Tuesday morning to watch it. And by the fourth quarter, frankly, I felt sorry for him. I felt genuinely sorry for that fourth stringer. I lost count of the sacks. I mean, Xavier Howard got one, for Christ's sake. I mean, that's how silly it was getting. But IDP wise, it was a good week for the Finns. Surprisingly, there's only about one of these that is regularly rostered. The rest of them are all out there. Jerome Baker, 27 points. Brandon Jones, 26 points. Ogba, I'm not going to go through all the sacks because there were too many. Ogba had 23.5. Zach Sealer, who's quietly gone about having a good season, 8.5 points. Nick Needham, who had that early pick, 18 points. Elsewhere, Christian Wilkins, Van Ginkel, Xavier Howard, Jevon Holland all got into double figures as well. I mean, it was just brilliant. They just ran riot, really. The matchup, it's a must-win for both teams. As I've already touched on, the Titans are conscious of the Colts. We've got to win it to stay in the hunt. But it does there is an interesting sort of IDP matchup. The Titans, I'd be looking at the linebackers, specifically sack leader Harold Landry, and recently acquired Zach Cunningham.
Yeah.
I think Tennessee's a good landing spot for him, actually.
Yeah.
Also, DB Titans top tackler this season, Kevin Byard. He was quietly gone about having a good season. The Dolphins' offense on Monday night impressed me in a little way because they threw quite a few curveballs at the Saints. But a lot of their sort of bread and butter plays are still short to medium yardage throws around the middle of that defense. Hence, you want to be looking at the sort of the linebackers and the safeties. At DL for the Titans, there's not much outside of Jeffrey Simmons. But just remember, I mean, for all I've been critical of the Dolphins O-line, and I was before the season, Tua's down at 32nd in the sack chart, 21st for pick. So, this week it's all about those Titan players who are going to be in and amongst it, tackle numbers. You don't want to be gambling on big plays because the Dolphins, I don't think, will give up, too many of those. 3 sacks against the Saints was quite unusual, but even without Davis, it still looked a fairly formidable Saints defense. So, stick to the tried and tested Titans players this game. The Dolphins, okay, I mean, this is going to be a little bit different than beating up on a fourth stringer at a Notre Dame, to be fair. But I do expect the game plan from Flores to be equally as aggressive this weekend. He's going to get after that patched up Titans running game. He's going to try and bring maximum pressure on Tannehill, who again, he is still the second most sacked quarterback in the league. So, there's no Henry. He's got limited options to look at. So, and if you're after pickups this week, once again, a few players I've mentioned. Christian Wilkins, 36 points in the last 2 weeks, and Miami's second best tackler, behind Jerome Baker. But, I'd look at going out and grabbing Emmanuel Ogbah, to be honest, off the waivers this week. And he is out there, current sack leader with 9 on the season. And I watched him, and it was nice to see a few of these players play live for the first time in a few weeks. Sit down, watch the full game, have time to do it. Because, there are a couple of occasions he just exploded off that line, Ogbah. He was on the quarterback before the offensive line, albeit a slightly patched up one, but still a decent, not a bad one. He was on the QB before they knew it. So 2 sacks, 3 quarterback hits. At linebacker, Jerome Baker. Again, watching him live this week just reminded me just how crucial that guy is to this defense and why he's the standout player and he's always going to be rostered. He reads the game so well and he's fast. He covers the ground and shuts people down, quicker than an awful lot of linebackers out there. So he's a must start. At DB, I was going to say swerve it, but again, I might be inclined to take a punt on the somewhat inconsistent Xavier Howard. Tannehill has thrown 14 picks this season, and I've got a sneaky feeling Howard might be due one this week. But it's not nailed on. It would be a bit of a punt for me. So go there if you're really short of DB. Summing the game up, I am going to go with the Dolphins, actually. I think they've got good momentum. This is an aggressive defense against the Titans side that, yes, they're still top of the division and looking good for the playoffs. But, 2 wins and 3 losses in the last 5 weeks. They're a beatable team. They're inconsistent. So I think for me, the matchup, the game itself hinges on whether our offense can do enough. They've got to cut out some of those holding penalties because, better teams are going to punish you for that. So it's going to be a tough game, but I'm going to go with the Dolphins.
I got the Dolphins but it's got. I really have got him.
I'm not looking forward to it. But...
Yeah, it will. I think it'll be a tough game. I think. I think a lot hinges for me on the Titans' offense. Whether I know AJ Brown is back and looks absolutely brilliant and playable at times, but he'll have a tougher game up against that Dolphins secondary. And it's whether Julio Jones, I think, is out. If he is, again, you look at it, the whole sort of puzzle really for the Titans. If it's slightly not quite right, I think the Dolphins win it. I just think they'll just have too much. They'll be able to stop them.
I think we're going into the game quite fortunate. I think we've got the COVID issue out of the way. We've got running backs that'll fit, and that could be key as well because they're not leaning so heavily on Myles Gaskin. Philip Lindsay got a good workload. Didn't do anything spectacular, and then they switched that up. They've gone to Duke Johnson.
They
use him as a bit of a battering ram. He's quite happy sort of running through and over sort of linemen. And the way they're starting to use Jalen Waddle as well.
That's the big problem. I think from the Titans D is good. Dolphins offense is getting good. I still think that there's that area of stretching out the field where Tua's got to work on and try and work out. I still think they're missing one player that can really stretch that field for them. But saying that, it was a big high dose of Waddle Gesicki going on. And I tell you what, mind you, it's fine if they can't cope with it. They can't cope with it. But if they can. It's just if they do have somebody that can really open that field out, then the defense have got to think again. And if they get a run game going, well, there you go. But it's positive for Dolphins.
Yeah,
it is
after 8 weeks, I'm just happy to be. If you told me after week 8 we'd be the 7th seed, I do appreciate the fact that the schedule has been soft. It's not. We've not. So this weekend should be.
Yeah,
a test, but.
I do think you've gone about your business, though. There's a lot of teams that just haven't, which they have also had reasonably soft schedules and have sort of like either imploded or been mucking around with their rosters and changing stuff about when they probably shouldn't be. Okay, you can say injuries have come into it, but for the Dolphins, I think they've dealt with it pretty well so far.
Yeah, one final point. and then we will move on. It's nice. I don't think it's any coincidence that, that everything sort of slotted together after, all the Deshaun stuff died down and Flores wasn't having to field questions, and that sort of monkey seemed to be off Tua's back. And then he just went on that roll. He was just, he had the best sort of passer rating for, I think, 4 weeks on the bounce.
I think I think people have got to really start to take notice and starting to look at him as a top QB going forward. I think now you're starting to see that he's doing it on the big stage, and it is a case of, where's his ceiling? Nobody really knows at this moment in time.
No, I think if we can get a better, and this is where the draft will be crucial. We still need stuff in the O-line. We need a better center. We need a better tackle. But anyway, that's for another time. So let's move on.
Okay, so I've got Raiders at Colts. I'm going to start with the Raiders. It was a tough week 16 divisional matchup. Saw the Raiders get an impressive win when most people didn't really fancy them against the Broncos. And I was one of those, really. Max Crosby, he showed up and he got his 6th sack of the season, and he top scored with 18.5 points. But apart from Big Max, there wasn't not any real names to mention. Even tackle machine Denzel Perriman didn't get over 10 points, which was a little bit of a shock. I know he's coming back from injury, but I'm sure that would have hurt a few rosters. Just a note on that, Divine Diablo, who's sort of like been filling in at linebacker, he only registered 1 assisted tackle in the game. I think he got a knock. Not quite sure what his problem was. KJ Wright, he's on the COVID list. So it is not pretty in that linebacker spot at this moment of time. So it's eyes on Perriman, especially for this week. If he is fit, good to go, and trending in the right direction, he is a must start. I know he's had a slight off week, and I've already watched one person put him on their bench, move him out of a slot and put him onto their bench. And I thought, okay, well, I wouldn't do it so far, not against the Colts, because, it's going to be heavy run. Well, and this is why, because Carson Wentz at this moment in time is on the COVID list. A lot of talk about that because of these new protocols, he's going to be okay. But again, you're gambling on him getting these negative tests. So if he doesn't go, then it's going to be run. That is all they will do, I would think. But if they don't, then you can look at the secondary. But I would be looking heavily on Perriman if you can. With that in mind, also you're going to have to look at Crosby, and you're going to have to look at Ngakoue. They're also potential starters if the Colts have potentially a banged up. They've got a banged up O-line and a backup QB. It could be the same kind of thing that we've just seen, as we've just talked about, Miami did to the Saints. Looking at last week, though, talking about what happened to the Colts, but a Baker, he top scored overall last week, which was a bit of a shocker. I'll go on speaking about the Cards in a bit. But there's potential points to be had because of that. If you think that it's such a big game, and I don't know, I just think that the Raiders, if they look at that matchup, there's definitely points to be had, and there's some sacks to be had on the Colts QB, whoever it may be. Going over to the Colts, it was a massive win for them against Arizona. And linebacker EJ Speed, he stepped up and filled the gap left by Darius Leonard, who was on the COVID list last week. It should be back to normal. Darius Leonard should be back this week, so normal service should get resumed there. EJ Speed will not be relevant because of that. He still does a bit of linebacker, but his numbers will drop significantly. So if you've looked at him and thought, oh, hello, maybe don't. Okereke is also, he had a bit of an underwhelming week, really, last week. I thought Bobby Okereke might score really highly, but I don't know whether it was the fact that he was playing with someone different to Leonard that maybe mixed up his duties a little bit. But I expect it, like I said, if Leonard's back, Okereke will be back to normal. So I would expect him to score steady, and they are safe bets this week against the Raiders. expect Kenny Moore to have a solid game as well. So he's somebody that I would be looking to start. I've toyed with the idea of him at DB, whether I start him this week. He's one of these players that maybe the ceiling isn't as high, especially as some of the Dallas DBs and some of the Dolphins DBs, maybe, where you would look at them and go, oh, big playability. Maybe not so much there with Kenny Moore, but he is a steady Eddie. And it depends. If you're looking at that spot to go steady scoring and good steady scoring, Kenny Moore is definitely a player to have. Yeah, and especially with I'm just looking at and especially with the use of the way they use Renfro, the Raiders, he gets a hell of a lot of targets over that middle of the field, looking at that sort of like 10, 15 yardage, which pays it straight into somebody like Kenny Moore's sort of like tackle numbers. So yeah, I would definitely look at starting him. As for the actual matchup, that's it. Sorry, talking about they're the Raiders players that I mentioned. That is about it for the players that you should be looking at starting, and the players that I've mentioned from the Colts. Anybody out of those, I wouldn't be starting them. Not in finals week. Matchups for me are the Colts will win this one, I think, but I think it will be close if Wentz is out. It does really throw things into the mix, but I still think the Colts are just going to be too strong on their run game, especially.
Yeah, I mean, I think I, along with quite a few others, sort of owe the Raiders a bit of an apology because we, well, I wrote them off about 2 weeks ago, so they were pretty much on the beach, done. Everything was, they capitulated. It had all been too much this season, blah blah blah, and then they bounced back with, a couple of good wins and put themselves right back in the mix. And again, I was for the Broncos. The Wentz thing is interesting, but as interesting are some of the defensive players coming back for the Colts. So,
yes,
and given the Colts will be sort of they may well have one eye on that sort of, they'll be praying for a Miami win, which is, I think the Dolphins beating the Texans, the Titans is probably arguably more likely to happen than the Raiders turning over the Colts. So I think the Colts are going to be going out there going, look, we've just got to take care of business and then hope that, the Dolphins do us a bit of a favor and we're still looking at the division title. So, the Wentz thing is interesting, but I am going to go with the Colts.
You don't think the news that John Madden passed away, might raise the Raiders' temperature a little bit and they do something special out of the blue? Shit happens like that now and again, and you just go,
it's funny, yeah. And it was, it would have been a shame if we'd gone all the way through the pod without mentioning, old John.
Legend.
But yeah, absolutely. Hey, like you say, stranger things have happened every week this season.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is one of those. I mean, you could have both. The top two in the South blowing it and losing, and then they're sort of going into the final game. So
I'm sure from the Colts would have been like, oh no, that's not, it's one of these kind of worlds where you look at it and go, he's such a name in Raiders history, and and it's going to be. I think it'd be quite emotional from that side, and sometimes emotion can do to some of these players, and it's be interesting.
I think if it were being played at the Raiders,
I agree. It's a shame. It's a shame, really, because I think that would be.
I think, out of respect for John, they should move it to Vegas and just say, "Look,
I'm sure the Colts.
All things being equal."
I'm sure the Colts will be up for that.
We'll pay for the flights. Would you mind just shipping all your gear over to Vegas for Sunday, please?
Yeah. Brilliant.
But no, that I think that if it were in Vegas, yes, I'd be more inclined to say it would have a bigger factor. I think they'll be conscious of it, but I think with the game being at the Colts, that's going to take a little bit of the shine off it. But yeah, it was sad news, So
yeah, absolutely.
Anyway,
so we've got a load of skipping going on now. So we mentioned earlier that we get going to not actual physical skipping, not unless Brendan's got something to show. But
no, I've only had 2 beers, so no, too early.
Wait till later. So we've got games that we can skip. 3 each. I've sort of like skipped 2.5 in total. Bren's got the full 3, so we're now in a run of skip games. So Giants at Bears was one of Brendan's. He skipped that. Have you got anything? Just want to comment on quickly on that one?
Very quickly. Giants got battered by the Eagles. Bears had a decent win against a poor sort of Seahawks side. Bears win for me. IDP value. Not a great deal, really.
Yeah.
Nothing I'm going to get excited about. Hence, it's not playoff relevant.
The only thing for me is Bears. I've got the Bears winning it. I've got, if Fields is healthy as well, I've got potentially Justin Fields could have a bit of a day here. This might be quite a nice way to sign off his sort of season where it's been a bit indifferent from him, but we could see something quite good from him towards the end. I think if he is fit, it'll be good, and he'll certainly have the support behind him. Bobby Quinn's a big one in this one for me. I think I've noticed him. He's on somebody else's roster that's against me in one of the finals, and I've gone, oh shit! I was looking for him, and there he was against the Giants. Who knows who is at QB? That is just one of those things. But even if it was, say, Daniel Jones or whoever, to be fair, he's going to fancy his. He's going to fancy it, and yeah, obviously, Roquan should score extremely well this week. Giants wise, interesting. I mean, anybody who's quoting who a Giants players at this moment in time without really knowing who the QB is going to be, I don't know if I would do it. But if Fields is healthy, I don't know. You've really got a lot of players. You've got a lot of players that potentially could be in play, because if Fields has a bad day, it could be horrendous, and that could be, it could be the big lads up front, Dexter Lawrence, players like that, and then the secondary. And we know the Giants have got a decent secondary. So yeah, interesting one really, but it depends a lot on who is at the QB spot for both sides.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns, but again,
yeah,
a lot of unknowns going into most of these games. So
the next game was one of my games, and that was Eagles at the Washington football team. And I'm skipping that one. For me, that is an Eagles win, but this is not a pretty match, this, in any sense of the game. I don't really know IDP-wise as well what to say about this, because there's quite apart from the Eagles linebacker scoring particularly quite well, the rest of it is a bit of a shit show for predictions. You could say Holcomb, people like Landon Collins, maybe, I don't know, but it depends on what Eagles turn up as well. I mean, they're kind of both teams are quite unpredictable when it comes to what they're doing at this moment in time. For me, I don't like it, hence me skipping it.
Yeah, I'd agree. I've got it down as an Eagles win. Washington just got taken apart at the weekend, and you'll get onto that later on. But yeah, I think I'd play safe. TJ Edwards, it's all about the linebackers for me. Someone we haven't mentioned who did have I think a good game at the weekend, Alex Singleton.
He did have a good game.
So someone we've been sort of quite keen on when the Eagles have turned in a good performance.
Yeah, I've gone in. Actually picked him up this week.
I like Singleton. I always have done. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the only difficulty is with the Eagles is the fact that they've got multiple linebackers that all score particularly quite well. And it's that TJ Edwards taking off Singleton taking off TJ Edwards kind of idea. They don't work. It's not like Kendricks and Barr with the Vikings, where they've both got different. You know what you're going to get from either of them. But for me, with these two, you kind of like, I'm not sure who's got the green dot half the time. It seems to swap about. Not necessarily that it ever seems to go to Singleton. Well, it did at the start of the season. But yeah, just I just find them really difficult to predict. And Washington got more things wrong than right, I would say, on both of those teams this year. I just don't. I think, and especially in finals week, you're probably looking at trying to put you're going to be banking on the safer bets more than taking the punt.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's why, and I'm not going to apologise for it necessarily, but a lot of what I think we're both covering off in the matchups this week are, yes, we're looking at the
Safer.
matchups, but yeah, and any sort of waiver pickups that, speaking personally, anything I've highlighted, I am sort of qualifying it like, yes, you could go and get a Xavier Howard, and yes, he might turn up with a pick, but it wouldn't be something I'd be sort of banking on going into the week 17 sort of finals. So any pickups you're looking at, you are really
consistent.
Go as much consistency as you can hope for on the waiver wire.
So. Exactly, and you got it. I mean, it is, there's a element of like there is always in the defensive side of it. You're banking on the offense doing what you think that they'll do. So I mean, it is difficult because there are two sides of this story consistently. But yeah, when it comes to these, like you said, go for those consistent players. The next one for you was Bucks at Jets, and you skipped that one.
Yeah, I think it's just a fairly. You've got your safe bets again, without wanting to sort of sound too boring for the Bucks.
Shaq's out, isn't he? Now Shaq's out for the season.
Yes, yeah, I think so.
It's a shame.
So again, you can look down that Bucks. There's not going to be anything out of the ordinary. There's not going to be anyone from the Bucks you pick up on the waivers. They are going to beat the Jets. That's a given. I know, the Jets had a decent performance.
See, I've got the Jets in this.
Really?
On a shocker. Yeah, I've got a couple of shocks, and this is one of them. Okay. I don't know why. I just got this feeling. I
did enjoy. I mean, credit to Zach Wilson. I mean, that rush, that scramble for the touchdown was quite impressive. But
what was the tackling about? I don't understand why nobody just nailed him.
I think no idea. But I mean,
I know you can get. I know obviously you got to be careful by tackling the QB or so say. But Jesus, that was taking the piss, really.
Well, I'm curious. You've sort of tweaked my curiosity now. So the Jets winning.
I just feel that the thing is with I think that this game.
The Bucks are potentially one of those few teams that maybe are putting their feet up a little bit, or.
I just feel that, I mean, they might have found something in Keyshawn Vaughn that is, which, I mean, we all hoped for it last season, to be fair, when drafted as a rookie, and I was quite high on him, and obviously he fell down the depth chart pretty sharpish, and we only saw slight glimmers of him, and now obviously with Fournette out, the backup to Rojo, and he had a game at the weekend, and it'd be just interesting to see whether. I mean, I like both of them in this. I've got Rojo in a lot of teams, and I think Rojo will score big this week. And I think Keyshawn Vaughn could as well. But I think what will happen is this game will turn into a bit of a shootout, and the Jets will just go for it. And I just got a feeling that they might do all right, because the thing is that's the best way to play the Bucks for me, is go for them. If you sit back and give them too much respect, you're in for a hard day, I think. But I think if you can go and attack that secondary that is potentially really banged up again, they've got problems. They've got problems at the moment, the Bucks, and they'll have one eye on making sure the people that they have got still around are going to be fit. They're not going to be they're not going to be breaking their backs. This, I don't know. Well, we'll see. I mean, I know they've still got a bit to play for, but I don't know. I just got a feeling. Anyway, so you're skipping that one, like you said. I'm going Jets just because I am. And I'm skipping the next one. I've got Texans at 49ers. Now that's me skipping that. Niners to win it, but I mean, it sounds like Jimmy G's out. If Jimmy G's out and Trey Lance plays, I was high on Trey Lance, like a lot of others were. But what we've seen of Trey Lance is I don't know. I just feel that might not go very well at all for them. It might not go well at all for the 49ers this week. I don't know why. I just got this feeling that the Texans are a difficult team to play against, especially when you can't all year they've been one of those teams that you can't really write off, or they never go down without a bit of a fight. They score quite well, and defensively they tackle their hearts out.
Scored very well on Sunday.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, what's his name? Davis Mills, isn't it? QB. Yeah. Fair play to him. And this is it. See, the thing is with the Niners is they're not. They've potentially got, if you look at it, they've potentially got their starting running back and their starting QB out injured. That's what they've got. Elijah Mitchell and now Jimmy G with Trey. I don't know. It just feels like people are going, oh yeah, the Niners will do this and do that, and you go, well, based on what? What are you basing it on? They chose Jimmy G over Trey Lance because they felt that Jimmy G was the right way to go. They must know that Trey Lance needs a season out, and now you're asking him to go in and potentially finish the season for him. Okay. Don't know. I don't know if I'd be that confident.
I think the problem with the Niners is that I think a lot of people like them going into the season. I was one of them.
Yeah, me.
I thought, potentially. But I think week to week, a lot of people carry on tipping the Niners on the basis of how what they should produce on the field, the way we would like them to play, and it just doesn't seem to pan out.
I mean, I love watching the Niners. They're my team, not to support or anything like that, but they're my team to watch. I just love it. I love the use of Deebo Samuel. I like Ayuk. Elijah Mitchell looks really good. Trey Lance obviously looks good. It's just they're just a great team to watch, and when they're on it, they're bloody brilliant. When they're not, it's like, oh god, it's like you said, it's frustrating because you always go, but look at the ability and look at the schemes and look at what they can do, and then you go, oh, but then they've had a nightmare, so it can be frustrating sometimes watching them. The next game was Broncos at Chargers.
Yeah, I'm jumping over this one purely, and this kind of epitomizes what we've just been touching on, in so much as you're looking for going into this final sort of, week 17 fantasy sort of, clash for all you people in sort of finals, send me an email, let me know what it's like. But you want that consistency, and I just don't see it in either. I mean, we've just touched on the Texans, who just put, what was it, 41 points up on the Chargers on Sunday, and you just think, and for these two teams, I tipped the Broncos to beat the Raiders. I didn't really see that Chargers result coming, and you think, I'm just not. Yeah. I've not been keen on a lot of the Chargers defense all season. I've been keen in fits and starts on the Broncos secondary, but not an awful lot else. And this was just one of those games where you went, I don't really know which way it's going to go. They both arguably got things to play for, but I just didn't like the matchup. Could be an entertaining, if rather messy game. It's that one on the list. I really don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I must say, out of all the games, I would have said this one is it's the one where I would swerve it like mad if you were telling games to bet on and exactly what they would look like. I don't know. Like you said, we backed the Broncos last week and they didn't really turn up against the Raiders. And then obviously the Chargers. I mean, I know missing Eckler. Eckler will be back this week, it looks like. So, I mean, I think that makes a big difference to them. I know they run the ball well through Justin Jackson, but at the end of the day, he's a backup. He's a backup running back, and it's the way that they use him. The threat's not really going to be there in a few other. It's a different entity with Eckler. But yeah, I agree. I've got the Chargers winning it.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm not really
invested in it. I don't think.
No,
me neither.
One game I am investing in is the next one that I've got, and that's the Cardinals at the Cowboys. Okay, Cardinals. So I mentioned earlier, Buda Baker. at last, he has joined the party with a big performance in Week 16. It's the first time that he's been over 20 points this season, which is huge, really. When you think of Buda Baker, you're talking top 2, 3, maybe even top pickup DB safety in the past 3 years. Buda Baker is bang up there because what they do is they use him in the box, they use him floating around. He's there for picks, he's there for sacks, he's there for everything. Tackle number's good. He can fly around and do what he likes. It's like having a free roll. That's often what Buda Baker gets. This season's been really different for him. And then suddenly, last week, it was like we've had Buda back, and he was flying about all over the place. He got to the QB twice, and he got himself a sack. He top scored with a huge 33 overall. He top scored 33.50 points, including 12 tackles. Like I said, a sack, 2 tackles for a loss. He is an absolute must start this week, because if the Cardinals are going to be able to beat the Cowboys, they're going to need this kind of performance by somebody like this, because playing against the Cowboys at this moment in time is going to be difficult. It's difficult on offense and it's difficult on defense. They've hit some form for me, the Cowboys, and I'll go on to that in a minute. The Cards didn't look great though as a whole, and that's what worries me in the matchup against the Colts. And this week's going to be completely another tough test. Apart from Buda Baker, the usual star players are in line for a decent week, I would say, this week. So your Jordan Hicks, Chandler Jones, Isaiah Simmons maybe, but none for me are sort of nailed on big score plays due to Dak, really. Dak mixes it up. I don't know how many run plays they'll have, how much what percentage they'll do things at. However, you've got to look at players. Like I said, the big name players will still score particularly quite well. Floor, it's just that ceiling is a little bit dodgy. If it's anywhere, Buda Baker's your man for me. This is a big game, and he's a big name, and this is one which, yeah, Buda could score well. Flipping over to the Cowboys, wow. It was I know the score. The score was huge. I can't remember what it was in the end. I haven't got that written down. 54-14, something stupid, something like that against Washington, and it did flatter them slightly. The offense. I know if anybody's been watching, they've got this going on in the Cowboys franchise. They've got this offense versus defense scoring thing going on at this moment in time. Who's going to beat the other one? And it's quite interesting to watch it, but it was sort of not really fair on the defense this week, because they were absolutely brilliant again. The defense, offense was great, don't get me wrong, but the defense really done it again. Every time the Washington got on the field, it just looked like they were going to be off quicker than they got on. It was crazy. Up front and in the secondary, these boys are absolutely lights out at the moment. I'll just go through the week 16 points for you, and this is why you talk about these players. DeMarcus Lawrence, 28 points, a sack. I know he got the IDP touchdown, but somebody's got to get it at this moment in time, and they are likely to get one. It's just on the pressure. The fact that the way they tackle, they're trying to punch the ball out consistently. And you know what? It happens. And it's another IDP touchdown for Dallas. And DeMarcus Lawrence, I think it's his first of his career. 28 points he scored. The next one down is 15.5 points. Micah Parsons, going to be Rookie Defensive Player of the Year. He got to the QB twice, and one of them was the sack. So that's the boys up front. Then we're going on to the DBs now. 15 points, Trevon Diggs. His 11th interception of the year. Incredible. 12.5 points, Jaron Kearse. He also got a sack and got to the QB. But Kearse, actually, his tackle numbers are extremely good. There's other players in DB as well. Anthony Brown's another one to mention. But those four, especially Demarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons, Trevon Diggs, Jaron Kearse, all four, I'd like them all. And they're players that I would have around my squad. And if you're talking about finals, this is a big game. This Cardinals Cowboys game, I just feel that there's going to be big plays, and do you know what? It's going to come from the D. It's going to come from one or the other, probably both at some stage in the game. There'll be a pick. There'll be something that'll happen that will change that game because they'll be so fired up for it. This is an absolute great game on the slate. This one, it should be an absolute. I think it'll be a shootout. And for me, Dallas win as the moment I have them stronger on offense and on defense than the Cardinals at this moment in time.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and especially looking at the matchup in the Cards division that I'm about to sort of jump on in a minute. I think the Cards may have blown it. I know. I mean, I was a big sort of defender. We've kind of, I spent the earlier part of sort of the season on the pod sort of defending the Cards, whereas you were, a bit sort of tired of everyone banging on about how good they can be, should be, would be, are, whatever. And we liked the defense if it could all click and all the rest of it. And then, okay, they've had their injury issues and Kyler and the ankle problem and all the rest of it. But they've just underperformed in games where, I don't know, they just, I don't think it's there. And I think the Rams will take the division if they're not.
Yeah.
I like the Cowboys, as you say.
Yeah, I like the Cowboys. I just got a feeling with the Cowboys, they just seem to be, this is the right time for them. And I just feel that there's a few bits that are just coming together when it comes to this team. There's been a few moans and groans throughout the year. And now, you had the Cooper thing, Amari not getting used enough in red zone opportunities. Bang, straight again this week. He's getting used. He's got to start actually this week. But it's these little sort of bits that where I don't know. And when you look at where the Cardinals are, and the Cardinals are just in a state of a bit of disarray at this moment in time. Exactly what they're doing, where they're going. Offense is not quite clicking. Kyler's on the right still for me.
No. I mean, I said a few weeks ago, I worried because they'd had such a good start to the season. Then he had the injury, whether they'd rushed him back, because it looked like, certainly the first week or two. And I just wonder whether I don't think he's 100%.
I worry about the whole thing with Kyler as well. I mean, I'm a fan of him. I've got a lot of shares of him in fantasy this year. And it's kind of worked for me, kind of not. I don't know whether I will next year. I don't think I'll be drafting him in anywhere as high as I did this year, just because it's this feeling of being found out slightly. And like you said, it could be injury that's not making him do the things, but that worries me as well, because the thing is that means that if he's got a knock and he's not 100% and he can't do what Kyler can usually do, then we can all see it. You know what I mean? When you know that Josh Allen or that Dak could be carrying injuries or whatever, but still managing to put it up. I know everyone's thinking, oh, he's still doing his job or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'd take the Cowboys in this one. I like them to go a long way in the postseason.
I can't. Yeah, I agree. I really.
I mean, and this is roundabout, and you know me better than anyone, but it's roundabout. I will generally always put 3 to 4, bets on just prior to the playoffs. Just when the odds are still semi sort of reasonable, and I'd say the Cowboys would be one I'd be sticking a few quid on.
For me, this game means an absolute lot for seeing exactly where the Cowboys are at this point in time. I think it'll be a real interesting game, this one, and I think they could if they make a statement. This is the game to do it in. This really is the game to do it in for me.
And Dallas fans behind them. But, Yeah. So, okay, right.
Talking about that, Cardinals. Right, go on. Do the Rams, Bren.
Let's have a look at the Rams.
Let's have a look at
Right, Rams at the Ravens. So let's start very briefly with the Ravens, and we've already touched on them. And you do have to feel somewhat. I know Nate won't feel sorry. I feel sorry for the Ravens.
I do really. I do really.
He's not that cold and calculated.
T Higgins, fucking T Higgins. Carry on.
But so yeah, I mean they were beaten by the Bengals as I mentioned, but I mean you give them some credit. They do keep sort of battling away and fighting despite everything. But let's be honest, I mean they've been one of the teams, if not the team, that's just been battered more than anyone by COVID and injuries and misfortune. Anyway, so. Which means in the recent loss, the IDP sort of week 16 highlights are not too much to write home about. Although to be fair, the DB Tony Jefferson top scored. Yes, that Tony Jefferson, the one we mention every week. 24.5 points, including a sack. He's been called up from the practice squad, but he's not going to be available this week.
Tony Jefferson.
Tony Brilliant. Jefferson, one and done. That's it. You'll never see him again. Patrick Queen, solid game, 18 points. Second week running, he's sort of racked up that sort of score. And at DL, someone else I don't think we've ever mentioned, Broderick Washington. Yeah, he had a sack, 14 points. The Rams, on the other hand, like most of the preseason favourites, and we've mentioned one or two already, seem to be sort of they're stringing wins together at just the right time, including the win over the Vikings on Sunday, 30-23. Even with Matt Stafford having a bit of a mare, which he did. Mr. Donald was at it again, just under 30 points,
Incredible.
1 sack, couple of QB hits, 3 tackles for a loss. And it was just a general pain in the ass all day for Mike Zimmer and the Vikings. Couple of players I doubt we've mentioned this season for the Rams. Linebacker Travin Howard had a decent day with 17.5 points. And tackle Greg Gaines in the DL had 17 points. Although, to be fair, despite the fact we haven't mentioned him, he has had 4.5 sacks this season. His stats are not bad. But again, we're talking about sort of safe bets this week. Troy Reader at linebacker, 16 points. Jalen Ramsey, he only had 13 points, but looking at the game as a whole, he did a pretty bang-up job of keeping old JJ quiet for the Vikings. So, but good coverage doesn't always translate to good fantasy points, unfortunately. Matchup, it's a bit one-sided. Credit, as I say, to the Ravens to still be in the playoff mix at 8-7 with all the, the personnel problems they've had, but they've lost 4 on the bounce. With the exception of top tackler Patrick Queen, there's no one else really from a fantasy perspective that you would be looking at or even could look at, because you don't know who's going to be playing sort of week to week lately for the Ravens. I have picked this game as one of the highlighted fives rather than swerve it a little bit unkindly because of the state the Ravens are in at the moment. I think, in this crucial fantasy sort of playoff weekend, as we've touched on, the Rams are one of those teams I'd be looking to possibly load up a couple of players. Aaron Donald goes without saying. Linebackers, Troy Reader and Leonard Floyd, a bit of a mixed bag. Reader's a tackle leader, but no sacks. Floyd's on about half as many tackles on 30, but has 9 sacks on the season. So, assuming Lamar Jackson starts, he has been sacked 38 times this season. So, if you're looking to, depending on who you've got, obviously Troy Reader, again, is one of those good tackle numbers, sort of fairly safe bets at linebacker. But if you're after a big play, then, Leonard Floyd is the main man at sort of the Rams in terms of sack numbers. DBs, again, looking at sort of safety first, no pun intended. Safety Jordan Fuller, 101 tackles this season. He's had a quiet couple of weeks either side of the COVID sort of protocol, but I would expect a better, busier week from him this week. Like I said, the Ravens they'll try and compete, they'll try and fight. I expect it to be, it won't be a blowout by the Rams. And technically the Ravens obviously are still in the hunt. Any outside picks for the Rams on the waivers? There's nothing obviously on the Ravens. But looking at the Rams briefly, I would have a look at safety Taylor Rapp, to be honest, if you are short at DB. 81 tackles on the season, 3 picks, 1.5 sacks, fumble recovery. His fancy numbers are inconsistent. That would be my only sort of reservation. But if you are going to pick him up this week and you are short, I would like someone like Taylor Rapp against the Ravens potentially, because they are struggling on both sides of the ball. So Rapp could do okay against this Ravens offense. Yeah, Rams win for me. My only concern would be Stafford's going to have to play better as they sort of roll on into the postseason. But yeah, I can't see the Ravens doing anything in this game.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you really. The Ravens, I just seen Lamar's been limping today in practice, so he may not be going anyway. So they're in a right old state, to be fair. The Rams, yeah. Talk about Stafford, yeah. The long-term side of things for the Rams, obviously, this is our last pod of this season, so just on that, I don't think the Rams have. I know they've kind of gone in on what they've done with Beckham and Von Miller and stuff like that. They've gone in this season to win it. I don't know whether they've got enough. They don't feel like they have at this moment in time because of Stafford's form, and I just doesn't feel quite right. They need to get that running game. I think that's why they're rushing. I don't know what we'll see of
Cam Akers possibly
Cam
back.
Akers. Yeah, I'm not sure what we'll see. I mean, that's incredibly quick. And I'm not sure whether that's going to be a plus thing for him. But in this game, I mean, you've got to fancy the Rams. The Ravens secondary, like I mentioned again, is absolutely shocking. If you're in a final, I can't see how. You've got to have a look. The Ravens couldn't deal with Higgins, Chase, and Boyd last week, all three of them. So cut Beckham and Van Jefferson are massive plays this week. So that's how it is. That's an absolute bang on fact. Doesn't matter what QB starts for the Ravens, secondary wise from them, they just can't perform. So yeah.
No, it's an interesting point on the Rams because, like we said with the Von Miller trade a few weeks ago, it was indicative of just how invested they were in going all the way, and it kind of had to be this season. But the QB situation is, I completely agree, mate. I think he has too many games where I don't know.
I mean,
I quite
a fully
liked
fit
it.
Ravens team. I'd be all over the Ravens in this. I think they'd be able to neutralize everything. Maybe not Cup, because the thing is every team seems to be trying to neutralize Cup, and no one seems to be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the key thing, I think, and that's why the Rams potentially, could go a bit further than maybe we think in the postseason. Because despite the fact that he was picked off 3 times at the weekend, despite the fact that he had a very poor performance, he still hit Cup for, I think, 10 targets and over 100 yards. And when he's having an off day, they seem to be able to do it. And they, I think the impressive thing on the weekend was, someone I sort of pulled off waivers a week or two ago. Not that it did me much good with other injuries, but leaning on players like Sony Michel, and they kind of sort of found a way, as good teams do, to win on the weekend, despite the QB having a bit of a shit show.
Excellent signing, Sony Michel.
But Stafford long term, the problem is going to be going into the draft. I mean, unless something's changed drastically, this isn't a great, QB draft. So it'd be interesting to see, I don't know, wait and see what the front office decide to do with the Stafford situation. But
it is interesting. It is an interesting one with Stafford. I'm a little bit underwhelmed by him this year, which has been a bit of a shocker. As soon as they drafted him, I thought, oh my God, this is gold. Obviously, from being NFC North and following that division, I knew how good a QB potentially Stafford is. His arm is incredible. And he has underwhelmed. It just hasn't quite gone there. like when if you'd have watched some of the games from the Lions, games that he just won on his own. To be fair, him and Golladay at that time, both of them, to be fair, have just not fulfilled their potential. Thank God, Stafford's been done
I
better than
do,
Golladay there.
but I do wonder: is it a case of, I don't know, is it the old adage of, a big fish in a small pond, and he's maybe not that
A little bit,
expectation that's come with the Rams jersey, and
a
um,
little bit. I think with all QBs, I think the thing is when you've got so many options and potentially, so many choices, so many people, so many mouths to feed, so many people to keep happy. This is the thing, that I felt with Baker Mayfield. I think that was a big problem that Baker Mayfield's had. Um, especially with Odell Beckham, which was that constantly making sure that he feeds everybody that's out there, because else not only and wins the game. So he's got two jobs to do. He's got to keep everybody happy and win the game. And this is the thing. It suddenly becomes where, if you've seen with Cup, I mean, Cup gets such a high percentage of targets, which is interesting, really, really interesting to see, and fine. But I just wonder sometimes whether it's Stafford going back to his old ways in a way, where he targets the only sort of like receiver that he trusts. You know what I mean? It's just
yeah.
that it's going to be interesting to see, and like you said, in the future, and see whether they believe in that way moving forward. But
Well, as a very clever sort of segue into it, would Russ Wilson be a? Because there's a lot of mutterings coming out of Seattle at the moment, but
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think
I
Russ
think
is.
one of them's going. Whether it's Pete or Russ, I think after the season they've had, I just can't see how they can go into next season at Seattle with. But
As you said, segue into it. Right. So now, this game, like Lions at Seahawks, so people look at that and go, well, this is obviously one that you probably should have skipped, or that you would have highlighted to skip. And yeah, you're right. But IDP wise and pickup wise, this is why I've brought this game in, because both teams take sacks and lots of them. Jalen Reeves-Maybin at linebacker, and especially Charles Harris, are my tips for players from the Lions to consider in this one. We know about Russ. Russ Wilson continues to get hit. He continues to hit the turf, and I predict that he will do a few more times this week. Even rookie Derek Barnes, possibly. He's a star leagues for the Lions, but those three especially Charles Harris, I must say, if you're talking about the sack count, this is one of those games where you could see. I think Harris was it a couple of weeks ago. He had the game against Arizona, top scored out of everybody, 30 odd points. Now, when you're talking about winning your leagues, this is a matchup where it could be a make or break one. It's a great one. Also, though, flipping it over to the Seahawks, Carlos Dunlap, he had a massive week 16. He got 2 sacks. So did Rasheem Green. Now, Green's a risky play anyway because he doesn't really figure. But Dunlap, I like. And you're talking about that big playability. That on both sides, the Seahawks and the Lions, there could be some big points there. At linebacker from the Seahawks side, obviously Bobby Wagner, Jordan Brooks, they're must starts. 2 other players I'm going to note as well, secondary players, Quandre Diggs, and safety Ryan Neal, the guy that's filling in for Jamal Adams. They're both worth a start. Ryan Neal he didn't really fulfill last week. I think he scored sort of mediocre points, but he's there. Depending on how he's used in this game, he could be potentially one of those safeties that gets allowed to come up into the box and make some plays. So I've got the Seahawks to win this. but like I said, I just got a feeling. I got a feeling that the highest scorer IDP wise could come from this game. Seahawks to win it, but I'm rooting for Dan Campbell and the Lions. I really hope I'd get that wrong. I actually want the Lions to win big time, and just because the Seahawks are absolute just dog shit. They've got ability all over the field, and they can't put it together. They look lost. I thought it was a poor display. I know the weather played into it, but they should have been able to. I mean, for fuck's sake, they should know how to play in those conditions. And they just looked again, just lacking in belief. Lots of things really, but yeah. For me, I want the Lions to win, but I do think the Seahawks take it because they're at home, and I just think it might just be a little bit too much for the Lions to go there.
I'm going to go with the Lions.
Yeah, go on.
I just
I don't know why. The more I looked at it,
I've really developed quite a fondness for the Lions.
I know.
For all they've been utter gash for most of the season. But they stick at it. They've got, I've never been Goff's number one fan. I don't, but gradually over the last couple of weeks have been some decent performances. They've been on defense. Have been, Harris is one. Anzalone was a player who had said, when fit, I quite like him. It's still a pretty poor team, but I don't know. They've got, I think they've got more character about them at this moment in time than the Seahawks by a country
100%,
mile.
mate. 100%.
And as we started off with my very clever segue into this game, but the Seahawks just look, and not for the first time with the.
But they're so they are frustrating to the point of when you look. I mean, you can name the team, right? You can name the offense, defense. A lot of those players, as you put them out, you go, yeah. I'll tell you what, it's too good. It's that old famous thing from the old Premier League. They're too good to get relegated. And you look at the Seahawks and you go, they're one of those teams. They're one of those teams where you go, they just. I don't know what it is. I really don't know what it is. Why they can't string together. There was parts of the game against Chicago which they looked phenomenal. They have one play and you go bang, 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 bang down the field and you go, that's what we want to see. Next play, it honestly looks like that they've never even met each other. You know what I mean? It's constantly disjointed, and it must be so frustrating being a Seahawks fan this year. I was just knocked it on the head, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean, an absolute shocker. But yeah,
but I do genuinely think this Carroll Wilson thing is going to come to head, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens before the end of the regular season.
Yeah,
there's an awful lot of noise and mutterings coming out of Seattle that something's going to happen.
I think so. I mean, last season was different because the Seahawks were still. There were some great games last season where the Seahawks were lights out. Russ scored everything. Some games which were like the glimmer of hope to say, look, this is what the offense can be. And that's why I think he stayed another year. This year, I just think that it might be down to him, but I don't know. I still don't think it is. I still think he's an elite QB, but that's a personal opinion. Right. So yeah, just to clarify one thing on that. Now, obviously, we've been talking about players that we know that you nailed on players, the players that are going to be consistent and stuff like that. If you are in a game in your final and you are predicted, you don't think you're going to win it. Put it this way: you got no chance you're going to win it. You're miles behind. You don't think you're going to be in there, and you've got DL spots, and you've got out there. This is the kind of game which I'm talking about, where Charles Harris, Jalen Reeves-Maybin, they could be chucked into those spots to be able to give you that, okay, it might all come crumbling down and they might not score anything, but they might score massive. And that's the difference in this one. This is a proper boom or bust call, put it that way. So, yeah, this is where I would go if I was going for it. This game here, because it could, well, it's a shit show, really, isn't it? Well, it's not, but, can't say that about the Lions, bless them. They've been trying their hearts out. Right, go on, where are we going?
Fluffy socks. Yeah. So my last game of the weekend, your Vikings at Green Bay. So you give me the Vikings again this week, haven't you?
It's because you won.
So
because they won. It's only because they won.
So yeah, where are we starting? So Vikings first. 30-23 loss to the Rams leaves the Vikes, 7-8. And they're going to have to win 2 remaining games to make the postseason. On the plus side, IDP wise, linebacker Anthony Barr had a great IDP day, 28.5 points. Second and third picks of the season. We've already touched on Stafford sort of lobbing it around a bit, so he had 2 of them. And at safety, Xavier Woods with 19.5 points. He had the third. So both had good games. And on the other side, Harrison Smith at safety picked up sort of 16.5 points. So they were sort of the highlights for the Vikes. Packers had a close Christmas Day win, 24-22 over the Browns, to clinch the NFC North again. Sorry about that. But it wasn't vintage Packers, and they did give the Browns sort of a couple of windows sort of back into the game. Yeah. But the Packers defense once again stepped up, did what sort of good defenses need to do. Linebacker Rashawn Gary top scored 25.5 points, including a couple of sacks, taking him to 8.5 on the season. He's someone I've highlighted before.
Good play in this one.
And he is still out there on the waivers. I'll come back to sort of Rashawn a little later. So he's still on the waivers, unlike fellow linebacker Devondre Campbell, who obviously isn't. Picked up 22 points, including another 13 tackles. And then at DB, someone I did highlight last week, I said I fancied him to pick off Baker. Well, actually did it twice, and picked up sort of 22.5 points for good measure, was the corner Rasul Douglas. So yeah, every once in a while I do get things right. But looking at the matchup, IDP wise, for the Vikings, again, in light of what's at stake this weekend, as far as the Vikings go, I would be conservative. I would play safe. Rodgers and this Packers offense are relatively stingy when it comes to sacks and turnovers, but the Vikings will compete. I mean, as we well know, with the exception of the Niners game back in November, win or lose, they've been in every game until late, very late in a lot of cases. So, in a competitive matchup, I'm going with the Vikings sort of 3 busiest top tackling players, really. And that's going to be Eric Kendricks and the safeties, Harrison Smith, and slightly less rostered Xavier Woods. I think you might find him sort of floating around on 1 or 2 waivers. Packers kind of had the same problem, really. I mean, Cousins, I know Mike Zimmer's not a big fan of Cousins, but to be fair, he's well down the list for picks and sacks this season. Doesn't turn the ball over too cheaply. So safe bets for the Packers this week are going to be, obviously Devondre Campbell at linebacker, got 138 tackles on the season so far, plus a couple of sacks and picks for good measure. And with 84 on the season, top tackling safety Adrian Amos, he's also got a couple of picks. He's probably a fairly safe bet. If you want to take a punt on a pickup for a big play, and I've said I'd come back to him, Rashawn Gary. I do like in this. He's trending up, obviously off the back of last weekend. But with 8.5, he's the Packers sack leader. And the nice thing about Rashawn Gary is, we've said this numerous times this season, he can be, slotted in at DL as well. So if you're looking for someone to come up with, a sack, and also for the second week running, I am going to suggest looking at Douglas.
Yeah.
He's still out there on a lot of waivers, and I'm looking at him not because I expect him to get another couple of interceptions, but with 53 tackles, 12 passes defended, 5 picks off just 10 games this season, I think they'll do kind of what the Rams, or they'll try and do what the Rams did. And I think they'll put him on Justin Jefferson watch. Now, normally, that would mean if you've got a corner sort of looking to do that, the QB sooner or later is going to start looking the other way, which means that the corner isn't necessarily going to score potentially high, because once that QB realizes that, he's up against good sort of man-to-man coverage, he's going to start looking for other targets. The problem the Vikings are going to have is, where else is he going to go? I mean, Thielen's just been confirmed on IR. I think that just came through this afternoon.
Yeah.
So, Cousins, I think there's a danger in this game that Kirk Cousins, despite the coverage, it may not be Douglas. I still think he'll have a good game, but I think they are going to isolate and identify Jefferson exactly as the Rams did. And I think the danger for the Vikings is Kirk Cousins will be left with no option other than to try and force throws in there. Because of the, he's short on other options elsewhere. So that's it on the IDP side. Summing the game up, I was quite upbeat on the Vikings last week, and I have enjoyed watching them. I did tip them to beat the Rams. I think what would concern me as a Vikings fan is for Stafford to have a poor day. Like, yes, I know Sonny Michel and other players stepped up, but they didn't really, for me, capitalise on the picks and Stafford's poor performance. So reluctantly, I am going to go with the Packers this week. They just seem to be, again, one of those teams, one of those favourites, one of those experienced playoff teams that's just ticking over, just doing enough. Defense is playing well. So I think unfortunately it's maybe
I agree. I agree.
The playoff road for the Vikes.
I agree. I think there's a few things that are playing into the Packers' hands in this game, and I think Thielen out for the rest of the season is one. Jaire Alexander is the guy that is back. If Jaire is back, and he is probably one of the best corners in the game, he will mark Jefferson, and he will, if he is fully back, then he will. But that said, I still think Rasul Douglas is a real good shout. I think he is a real good shout. I like him. And the thing is what will happen is that he'll have to try and push the ball to KJ Osborne or whoever it may be, and they will absolutely, the chances for picks are right there. And also, like you said earlier, I know Kirk hasn't been sacked that many times, but this game, he's going to... Kirk doesn't throw. He doesn't. He's one of these guys that he's got an option semi-open, so he will still throw it. But in this one, if it will be shut down, he will take the sack. He will take the sack. So I do think Rashawn Gary is a real good shout. I think they're two players that I would be looking to. Yeah, you can definitely have a punt in that, and you've got good reason to have a punt on them. They wouldn't be shots in the dark, put it that way. All right. So the game. Yeah, I've got the Packers because it's just too. I just feel it's just going to be too much. I think we've missed our chance. We had our chance a few weeks ago, and I just think we've missed it. To be fair, if we were to get to the postseason, we would not last long because we need to be 100% the whole organization for us to do particularly well. We just don't have any depth. And I think that's the biggest problem. We've got potentially tight end out, wide receiver right now. Daniel Hunter out. I mean, these are massive. They're not just tiny players. They're massive players for the Vikings when you're talking about what kind of roster you have. Some teams have got a lot of depth, but we just don't, not real depth, not postseason depth. You know what I mean? That we would be quickly back out of those playoffs like a shot, I would think. Right, so I've got Browns and Steelers, Monday Night Football, the final game of the year. Well, actually, no, we will be into the new year, so I don't know what I'm talking about
Yeah.
there. Final game of our year. That's what I meant. I just read it. So the Browns week 16. MJ Stewart at DB was absolutely bloody everywhere in the loss to the Packers. But if John Johnson or Ronnie Harrison don't return this week, he is definitely worth a start. He's obviously filling in for him, but yeah, he's certainly scoring particularly well. He scored 22.50 points in week 16. He racked up 10 tackles and a tackle for a loss. Denzel Ward, he also scored well at DB, and Anthony Walker at linebacker. He got an average score really for himself. But in this one, the Steelers are going to be heavy run game from them. So I expect Walker and JOK to score particularly well. And if there are still players missing in the secondary, MJ Stewart has to be worth a shot. Going over to the Steelers, I mentioned this right at the start. Hang on, is Bren just putting his mic on?
Sorry.
Going over to the Steelers, I mentioned this right at the start of this pod. TJ Watt, he cost me last week, and I was stupid to even play him. I read it like everybody else did, that he had cracked ribs, and I do not understand the decision to play injured. He's an outside linebacker whose job is to pass rush, right? So that's his job, right? It involves a lot of upper body strength, especially. It's just crazy for me. For me, it's like a sprinter with a broken leg. That's what that is. You just cannot play him. You cannot play. And what was it? I think it was a second snap. He had his arm up in the air and he was holding his ribs. And I was like, here we go. And then he was off every other snap. He was off. They were sort of resting him throughout the game. And yeah, it just didn't work. Absolutely pointless. So yeah, for me, if you've got TJ Watt and they say he's good to go, I would really, really proceed with caution with him. My shot would be I would drop him. Now I would drop him, definitely. Because it's a huge risk. If you're going to drop him for somebody, if you can get Cam Hayward, then you get Cam Hayward, because Cam Hayward is absolutely decent, especially in this matchup. Alex Highsmith is the other one. Obviously, linebackers Joe Schobert, Robert Spillane actually scored quite well this week. But yeah, for me, it would be Cam Hayward that I would be going for if you can. I wouldn't play TJ Watt. I really wouldn't. Going back to week 16, DB Mig Fitzpatrick, he scored well, and he should be starting in this one this week, because he's definitely going to be, I would say, potentially pretty busy, even though it's going to be a heavy run game from the Browns. It's one of those games where they're still going to have to go over the middle to players like Austin Hooper to get them the yardage that they're going to need just to mix it up. So for me, it's a real tough call on the matchup. Both teams have been really underperforming, mainly due to injuries and just generally. I'm going to go Browns. Just even though it's at the Steelers, I just think that if TJ Watt is fully out, which he should be, yeah, I just don't think they're going to get the pressure that they're going to need to, and I think that the run game will just tip the Browns over the edge.
Yeah, I'm going to lean towards the Browns as well. I think what you said about what is spot on. It just beggars belief, really. I mean, all four of these teams in this division are still in with a shout.
Yeah.
And to be making calls like that, it's just so
against the Chiefs as well, where not being funny or anything, but
you're not expected to win the game anyway, really. What? But and they're not going to. Yeah, well, go on.
But for me, pass rush is not the be all and end all for against the Chiefs, especially with Kelsey out.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, okay, let's slightly tweak our game plan a bit. But I don't know. It was just like there was quite
like
a few blitzes going on, and I thought, fuck that. You're giving up short yardage.
With the injuries for, to the Chiefs, because they had Edwards-Helaire was out, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So you think, well, they're sort of they're down on the run. They, like you say, they've got sort of Kelsey out, so you could have left Watt out. You could have said, right, well, we'll drop, we'll deal with them in sort of the middle and the secondary, and we'll drop off a bit. And I think if anything, that might have worked to their advantage, because the Chiefs wouldn't have been expecting that. They'd have been expecting, the old Steelers, balls out, let's go get them sort of defense, which is what everyone's been used to. And
I think the shocking thing for me this week has just been the fact that I'll just double check now. I'm sure. Let me just double check now. I'll just type it in. What? Let's just check him. TJ Watt. He has nothing on his name this week. TJ Watt will play through cracked ribs again.
Yeah, but for how long?
I don't get it. So now he's playing. Last week, you look at his scores week on week off, pretty much pretty good weekend. Yeah, absolutely. And then last week, 1.50 points. Yeah, one solo tackle, which was pretty much the first snap, I think. Yeah, I mean, God, the problem is that it's an absolute nightmare for fantasy managers, because it's TJ Watt. So you think to yourself, how can you leave out I think is he the sack leader? He might be, might not be at this moment in time. I'm not quite sure, but he's there or thereabouts, and he's a game. He's a week winner. That's what he is. But when he's got broken bloody ribs, he just isn't. He's not even a bloody relevant player. Last week was an absolute shocker for me. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I need 10 points out of you, and you're and you're holding your ribs in the first play. I was like,
no, I mean, I'm going to go with the Browns. They're both inconsistent teams. They've both got issues. I've got a lot of issues with Baker. We've already touched on that. Having some of the run options back, I think, will benefit them, especially with, as you've said, Watt being out. I think, and I'd like to see a Browns win, because it just makes that final game of the season against the Bengals just that much more entertaining.
Yeah.
I mean, that'll put the Browns 8-8. That'll drop the Steelers back to 7-8, something like that. Anyway, so the Ravens, sadly, I don't think are going to be relevant for obvious reasons. So, yeah, I'd like to see a Browns win just for selfish reasons, because I'd just like to see that, that sort of Bengals Browns game in sort of week 18. So, but that's just me. It's not fantasy relevant whatsoever, but could be a fun end to the division. So,
right. Well, that concludes it all. This year is pretty much done. Well, it is for us from the pod side of things. So good luck in your finals and bring in those ships. Thanks for tuning in, guys. As I said, last show of the season. We will be back soon for some IDP news and a possible Super Bowl IDP review or something like that, something similar.
We'll do something.
We'll do something. Bound to do something, and hopefully we'll have some news for you as well about what we're up to. But have a great new year. Stay safe, and remember, keep rushing.